All right, well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Megan Blackmore, and I am a learning coordinator with the Invasive Species Council of BC. ISCBC is a collaborative-based organization committed to reducing the spread and impacts of non-native species in BC. I'm joining you today from Kamloops, where I'm grateful to live and work on the unceded traditional territory of the Secwepemc. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar, co-hosted by the Integrated Vegetation Management Association of British Columbia and the ISCBC, entitled A Successful Approach to Invasive Plant Management in Gravel Pits. This webinar is approved in BC for 1 continuing education credit towards pesticide applicator certification. To qualify for this credit, you must participate in the entire webinar, including the quiz at the end. The quiz link will be added in the chat box immediately following Dave's presentation, and we'll remind you again at the end to do that. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for purchase on the ISCBC's Learning Center later this month. ISCBC and IVMA members will have free access to the recording, and everyone will have the opportunity to earn CEC credits if they watch the entire recording and complete the quiz. You can see the link to ISCBC's Learning Center in the chat box. If you have questions about the credits, you can reach out to our following speaker, Gwen Trimpton at IVMA. I'm sure you're all Zoom experts by now, but if you are experiencing any technical problems with Zoom, please go to the chat box and Fiona will see if she can assist you. Also, everyone has been muted, so you should only be able to hear myself and the presenters. In Zoom, you have the option to select speaker view or gallery view at the top of your screen. We recommend speaker view. If you have questions during Dave's presentation, please type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Dave will be taking time at the end of the presentation to answer questions, time permitting. If you see your preferred question already in the Q&A box, you can click the thumbs up button to upvote the question and bump it to the top of the list. If we run out of time to address all of the questions, we will share the questions and the answers by email later. At this point, I am pleased to give a warm welcome and introduction to Gwen Trimpton, Executive Director of the Integrated Vegetation Management Association. Please enjoy the webinar, and over to you, Gwen.
Good morning. Thank you, Megan. This webinar, as Megan mentioned, is co-hosted by the Integrated Vegetation Management Association of BC and the Invasive Species Council of BC. The IVMA is a recognized organization dedicated to the responsible practice of vegetation management throughout the province. Our membership represents diverse industries, including forestry, gas and electric utilities, railways and highways, and invasive plant management. The IVMA is the credit coordinator for the Ministry of Environment continuing education program for the recertification of pesticide applicators for the forestry, industrial vegetation, including noxious weeds, and aerial categories. You must be a member of the IVMA for us to track your credits. Information on this program, as well as how to become a member of the IVMA, can be found on our website at ivma.com. We plan to enhance the opportunities for obtaining credits by holding these webinars. As Megan mentioned, this webinar qualifies for 1 credit in British Columbia and 1 credit in Alberta. You must provide us with your pesticide applicator certificate number when you register for this webinar, and stay for the entire presentation and answer the quiz at the end. You don't need to pass the quiz in order to obtain your credit. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker, David Ralph. Dave is the Senior Operations and Safety Manager with the Invasive Species Council of BC. For 34 years, Dave worked for the BC Ministry of Agriculture and BC Ministry of Forests, Lands, and Natural Resource Operations. He worked extensively developing invasive plant management strategies and control recommendations for pasture, range, and intensive crop production. He is a long-standing member of the IVMA and of the Canadian Weed Science Society. He was the 2019 recipient of the Canadian Weed Science Society Excellence in Weed Extension Award. In 7 years with the Invasive Species Council, he has focused on training, project coordination, and management. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you, Gwen. I'm just going to share my screen with you. How does that look, Fiona? Gwen?
It looks great, Dave.
Okay, I'm just going to take my picture off here. I don't like looking at me. Okay, well, I guess I have to. There we go. Okay, I'm ready to go here now. Thanks very much, everybody, for joining in this morning. Here we have quite a number of folks on the webinar, so wonderful to hear. Thanks for your interest in invasive plant management. So I'm going to be talking today about a successful approach to strategic invasive plant management in BC Ministry of Highways and Infrastructure gravel pits. We started this program with the ministry and the Invasive Species Council about 8 years ago. We're just finishing off our 8th year with the program, and it's been successful in that we continue to do the program. So that's really good news for everybody. So I'm going to be talking about briefly about the invasive impacts, some background on the historical approach, our goals and objectives for this program, our strategic approach to invasive plant management in gravel pits, a bit about logistics, our reporting results, and of course some benefits. So of course we're all very familiar with the impacts from invasive species, specifically plants in this webinar. They have a very big economic impact on our society and our industry. Their control and management costs, they reduce productivity, they cause trade restrictions. We have experienced that in the past with the US and other countries. They reduce property values, and they reduce crop production and quality. Their impacts on the environment are they reduce biodiversity. Some species become extinct because of the invasion from invasive plants. They degrade soil, cause erosion, and they alter fire cycles, which we're starting to see the impact of in BC. The US has seen that impact in the western part of the US over a number of years. The social impacts from invasive species and plants are they are hosts for diseases of other crops that are they are cause human and animal suffering through toxicity, and also reduce recreational activities and opportunities. If you've ever tried to walk through an infestation of Scotch thistle, you'll find that pretty much an impossible thing to do. So our historic approach to invasive plant management in gravel pits has been that multiple agencies have treated gravel pits over the years. Contractors will come in from local regions and do it, and so forth. Often there's a bit of an issue with coordination. Intermittent treatments. Treatments are not always scheduled properly each year, and they're not always consistent. As well, the consistency in scheduling sometimes doesn't happen. Non-residual herbicide use It was always the standard for gravel pits. We didn't want in residual products used in gravel pits because of the movement of soil. That did have some problems in the past. And typically we're using a non-residual and non-selective herbicide in the form of glyphosate, and that usually required multiple treatments per year. And in essence, we were treating the symptom for invasive plant management in gravel pits. We really weren't getting ahead very much. Any land-based activity that transports seed and soil and leaves soil exposed can lead to invasive plant spread. So we see a lot of industry in forestry. There's a lot of soil disturbance there, of course, mining. And in the bottom right corner there, you can see the large gravel pit. Gravel pits and quarries are, when they become invaded and with invasive plants, they end up having contaminated material in that pit. The invasive plants are dropping seed in the soil and the aggregate materials in that pit, as well as creeping rooted plants are contaminating soil with their rhizomes or root pieces. And of course, all of the equipment that are in that pit working, removing material, bringing material in and equipment has the potential to be a pathway for invasive plant spread beyond that pit. So the goals and objectives for in the gravel pit program we have is we want to eliminate the weed growth in the gravel pit area to reduce further deposit of viable weed seeds in the soils. And in the aggregate materials that are being moved off of the site, like winter abrasives, pit run, base road materials, as well as just equipment, as I mentioned, that is removing and carrying the weeds, seeds, and plant parts out of the pit. The objectives are within the pit boundary. We're controlling weeds in as early growth stages as we can, preferably well before flowering when able. As you know, we can't get to all of the sites or all of our sites, or in our case, all of our pits early in the season before they go to seed. But in that situation, we try to use some best methods and combinations. We'll often go in and try to, in the later part of the season, we'll pull, dig, and bag or deadhead invasive plants so that those seeds aren't deposited on the soil. And where appropriate, we can use herbicides as well. But we've got to be careful with the specific weather that we're experiencing each year. We often get fire restrictions, which minimizes our use of some of the motorized equipment, or even equipment that we use for cutting. And often our weather is not conducive to spraying as well. So all of the different problems and hurdles that we come across as pesticide applicators on a regular basis. We are concentrating on aggregate piles, sand piles, gravel banks that are transient, materials that will be moved off-site from the gravel pit. And we're looking at open loading areas and parking areas and travel areas in a pit. All areas that are can be have invasive plants, and they can be picked up by vehicle and equipment and moved to another site. So our strategic approach is we preview the pit, we review it first, we find out what the species are, where the species are located in the pit. Are they on gravel piles or aggregate piles, sand piles, and where their location are, and any other specifics that we need to know to make a good strategic management approaches to controlling the invasive plants. That we create a pit prescription and a schedule of when we'd like to go into there. and do our work. As the project manager, I make the prescriptions for the gravel pits and the treatments and what products we're going to use and where. We also, in our files for the strategic management process, and we create files on each pit. We have a management plan, as well as we have a satellite photos and maps of the pit. And I'll show you how we use those a little bit later. I always do a pre-treatment visit with any of the contractors. We identify the treatment areas with specific herbicides for use. We identified our pesticide-free zones, restricted areas, and sensitive areas in a pit. Typically, we don't have creeks or streams or anything running through gravel pits. But what we have seen, which is sort of unique, is that some of the old gravel pits have very deep holes. And over the years, they filled up with water, and the water remains in the pits. And then we start seeing other desirable plant life and animal life in establishing themselves in these big, deep holes that are small water containing areas. And so we have a water course in a pit. So we have to follow the pesticide free zone requirements of 1 meter above high water for glyphosates products, and then the 10 meters above high water mark for any of the other herbicides we use. We monitor the treatments for efficacy, and we are reviewing it as well for to ensure that the contractor has met the deliverables that are within the contract that they have with us. The survey, treatment, and monitoring records are all kept on each specific gravel pit, and all of these records are entered into the invasive alien plant program. We develop our pit management plans each year, and we update our visual files. So each year after a pit has been treated or addressed, we go in and we update what was carried out that year in that specific pit. And we also make a prescription of what we feel should be carried out at that pit the following year. At the end of each season, we send the annual pit treatment files to the responsible area managers for the Ministry of Transportation. So these area managers are aware of exactly what's taken place in each one of their pits. So the noxious weed or invasive plant management plan, it contains the purpose of the program for that pit. We're trying to reduce in weeds infestations and reduce seed banks and create less contaminated soil. Pit information as far as size, location, coordinates. We include the treatment dates in that weed management plan, what the target species are, as well as the treatment information. We want to know what herbicides we're using in that pit other than glyphosate. And just as well to mention that when we're using herbicides other than glyphosate, we require the permission and approval from the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, environmental roadside manager, the regional aggregate managers, and the district managers. This is to ensure that we're going to be doing work in a pit that is appropriate for that pit and that doesn't interfere with any of the operations or long-term plans for a gravel pit by MOTI or the maintenance contractors in the area. We also include where in the pit the products will be applied, and we also include any other management methods that we're doing at a specific pit, like pulling or cutting and then bagging. The IAP input is also included in there, and as well the pit satellite photo, and this includes areas treated with the herbicide and which product. This is an example of one of the satellite photos for that's included in each one of the files for each pit. And here we have, I put in polygons that are green for inactive areas where aggregate is not being piled or removed. where it's not being transient, areas that are parking areas, areas that are traveled throughout the pit. And these areas are usually treated with either milestone to the maximum label rate or Clearview to the maximum label rate. The areas that are in red, the polygon area within that red area is going to be an aggregate pile or materials that will be moved and potentially removed from the site. And these piles and aggregate and materials are only treated with glyphosate because it's non-residual. And if that material is moved off the site, then there's no concern with any type of vegetation, desirable vegetation being planted in that. We have had in the past with the Ministry of Transportation gravel pits, materials that were treated with residual herbicides and then moved to an area that wasn't appropriate. So hence the old standard of only using glyphosate in pits. And now with the use of some residual herbicides in gravel pits, we've just got to make sure that we have all of the information available for all of the contractors and the pit managers so that they're aware of exactly what's gone on in that pit. Their herbicide treatments, we use glyphosate on all species in all areas of the pit. Transient materials, as I mentioned, aggregates of various types, sand piles, open banks. If there's a sand pile or a aggregate pile, we'll always use glyphosate on that. We also only use glyphosate on open banks. Often you'll see in a gravel pit, there's an open bank where maybe material has been taken. One of the rules, sort of a rule of thumb that I have with contractors, if they anticipate that a loader may go into a pile or a bank and remove material and put it on a dump truck, then that's considered a transient material and it's only to be treated with glyphosate. Other products that we're using in gravel pits that are of the residual nature are, we use milestone on most broadleaf species where no transient materials occur. Areas that are parking, roads, perimeter areas, fenced lines, vegetated areas. We were finding that with glyphosate use, you're spraying it everywhere in the pit, and you're also killing off the desired vegetation like grasses and so forth, which are served to be a good deterrent for invasive plant movement in a pit, as well as introduction. So we are trying to encourage as much desirable vegetation, usually in the form of grasses, that we can in the gravel pits. Clearview is also a product that we use. We typically target Clearview use on blueweed, Horiolisum, and common bugloss. What we find or what we have experienced is that milestone is not effective on any of these three weeds, and we find Clearview is very effective on it. So we will use Clearview when we come into a pit and we have any of those three weed species located in the pit. Often we'll find is that a contractor will put up a tank mix with Clearview and then complete treatment of any one of these or all three of these species in the pit. And then they've got some mix left over. Rather than trying to dispose of it in some way, the best way to get rid of and use herbicides is, of course, to spray them and use them. So we will allow our contractors to use remaining mixtures of Clearview in their tank for use on other weed species that are in the pit as well, like the knapweeds. We find Dalmatian toadflax is pretty effectively controlled with Clearview as well. We have considered, and in special circumstances and considerations, use other herbicide products other than glyphosate products, milestone or Clearview. One that comes to mind is that we have used on occasion Tordon 22K, and that has been specifically for leafy spurge. Clearview and Milestone are not very effective on spurge. We don't want spurge being removed in materials from gravel pits, so we will make a special prescription for that and appropriately note that on the herbicide treatment and management plans for each pit. Just as well as a note, we only use Clearview alone. We will not use Restore. Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure policy is that 2,4-D products are not to be used on any MOTI jurisdiction. So although 2,4-D is pretty effective as a tank mix with either Milestone and Clearview, we're not able to use that. Hopefully down the road that may change. So herbicide use comparison. I'm going to use the 106 mile pit, of course, just north of 100 Mile along Highway 97. And in 2016, we used Milestone there, and as for a total of 4.7 hectares treated, and we used glyphosate there as well in some areas, and we treated 1.6 hectares. In 2018, Milestone treatment was reduced to 7 hectares. We got a very good effective management and control of the species in 2016, and we weren't required to use any glyphosate in 2018. That was a nice surprise. So over a total of the 3 years, we used 2.7 liters of Milestone product, and we used 4.8 liters of glyphosate over that period. So for a total of 7.9 liters of herbicide product in those 3 years. 2019 and 2020, we rested that pit. We had gone in there and done 3 years worth of treatment. We'll often rest an area for a year after 3 years, depending. It's always, the decision is always made the year of potential treatment. In 2021, we did 2 hectares of Milestone, used a liter of that, and we didn't use any glyphosate at all. If we had only used glyphosate on that pit over the 3 previous years, we would have used about 25.16 liters of glyphosate per year. And over a 3-year period, that would have been 75.5 liters of glyphosate. Over a 6-year period, it would have been 151 liters of glyphosate. So you can see that we've dramatically reduced the environmental impact of herbicides on that pit. And we're pretty pleased with that reduction of herbicide use into the environment. We see a lot of the same kind of results with many of our other pits as well. The 106 mile pit, I should mention, is an inactive pit as far as materials being removed, although they do bring in some material like spoil piles, and we'll remove those, but often mostly that pit is used for storage of materials, spoil piles, equipment, and as well bringing in some asphalt and piling it there for reuse. So manual control is effective. We often will bring in some of our action teams or job creation partnership teams in the past to do manual control on some pits. We typically don't like to use contractors for too much manual control, although when required, they will. We would like to keep the herbicide contractors doing just that, doing herbicide work. They've got the larger mobile equipment, and their use is best put into the use of herbicide treatments on the pits. So you can see on the left there the before picture of the spotted knapweed on the entrance to that gravel pit. And then on the right, you can see that there has been all of the spotted knapweed was removed and bagged, and it's looking really good. When we're pulling when we're pulling invasive plants in the gravel pits, we like to have them go in after a rain. The soil's much is more moist, isn't so hard, and we find that we get more of the root of the plant, which will effectively kill that plant when the soil's moist versus when it's very dry and hard packed. We've done, here's some more pictures of manual treatments. There on the left, you can see some yellow hawkweed on a aggregate pile. That's at the Larson pit north of Kamloops. And then the below picture there, the invasive hawkweed has been removed. It's usually very easy to pull the entire plant out of these aggregate piles because the soil is very loose and very fine. And we can usually get most of the root out. Even with a stolenous type of invasive plant species like hawkweed. The tap-rooted plants like knapweed, they come out very easily. The middle pictures there, you can see that the crew is busy pulling and bagging the weeds along the traveled corridors within a pit. And we also use saws and brush saws to do cutting. Often we're at a point where it's so infested and hand pulling or digging is not very efficient, and perhaps that site or that location or spot isn't suitable for herbicide treatment. So cutting is not the best method, but at least we're stopping seed production for that specific year and not adding to the seed bank in the soil. Bags of pulled plants are all piled into the vehicles, and then they're deposited to the local landfill where the landfill contractor is notified that they're invasive species and that they should be deep buried. So just back to 106 Mile there, we can see some results over the number of years. The three photos on the very top are all prior to us getting into the 106 Mile and doing our herbicide treatment. And then the three pictures down below are successful weed management within the pit. So we, as I mentioned, we concentrate a lot on roadways and travel corridors within a pit. This is a very large pit, so there's a lot of different travel trails and so forth throughout. So those are also priority areas, as well as the aggregate piles that are in gravel pits. This is a pit up north of Kamloops, and we went in initially in 2016 and we treated the knapweed, spotted knapweed, as well as some Dalmatian toadflax. And we got very good control on it. But as is the case with invasive plant management, we often get rid of one particular species and we get another species that is moving in and infesting. Now, the reason we see Horiolisum moving into this site the year after knapweed was treated, because the knapweed in 2016 was treated with Milestone. So any residual aminopyralid that was in the soil is controlling the knapweed and susceptible invasive plant species to aminopyralid the following year, but we're not getting that efficacy with aminopyralid on Horiolisum. Any of the aminopyralid that's residual in the soil is not affecting the Horiolisum at all. So the following year, when we see Horiolisum or other species moving in, we may need to go in and adjust our herbicide choice. Obviously, in 2017, we would have gone in and treated the Horiolisum with either Clearview, or if it was unsuitable for a residual herbicide, we would have treated it with glyphosate. And when we're using glyphosate, we often try to get in and schedule pits where glyphosate's being used as early in the season as possible, so we can eliminate that plant from maturing and going to seed. This is a gravel pit up near Logan Lake, and on the left you can see that it's quite heavily infested with spotted knapweed, both up the bank into the soils up there as well as along the roadside. and the entrance to the pit. And on the right-hand side, you can see the results of spotted knapweed being treated the year before. This would have been milestone used on this site. It's interesting, you can see the foxtail barley on the right-hand picture just moving in along the very edge of the road. So of course, milestone aminopyrrolid would have no effect on any grass species. So that's filling in the spot where the spotted knapweed has previously been. We always do concentrate on the entrances and access and exits to gravel pits, because these are the areas where we see most of the vehicle traffic and equipment traffic congregating and moving in and out of. So we're also, not only are we treating inside gravel pits, inside the fence perimeters and boundaries, when necessary or when required, we will often try to treat the areas outside the boundaries or the fences of gravel pits. If we're just going to treat inside the gravel pit and leave the outside of the gravel pit untreated, we're just leaving a source to reinfest or reinvade that gravel pit. So this is an area up near Lac Lejeune where it had quite a right-of-way. The left-hand picture was the treatment after milestone was applied in 2015. And you can see there's a lot of spotted knapweed along the right-of-way outside the fence boundary between the fence and the road. And on the left-hand side, you can see that the grass is recovering there. And indeed, it could be a site where we could where it could be reseeded and enhance that grass growth to resist invasion and regrowth of the spotted knapweed that's in that location. This is Jewel Pit up near east of 100 Mile near Canham Lake. And on the right, you can see there in 2016, very heavily infested with spotted knapweed. And in 2018, we've eliminated the spotted knapweed with use of, we actually used Tordon 22K on this site because we were on a roadside right-of-way. We were very comfortable with the residuality of Tordon 22K being applied here. And of course, that just reduces our need to come back and do follow-up treatments after shorter times. With Tordon 22K picloram products, we see we're getting often in ideal locations anywhere from 5 to 6 years worth of residual control, whereas with Clearview and Milestone, we're usually seeing maybe a maximum of 2 years control, sometimes 3, depending on soil types. We want to stop the spread from site to site, from gravel pit to gravel pit or gravel pit to another site. And so we want to encourage our contractors just to stay on the access roads. This picture on the left is very heavily infested with knapweed, spotted knapweed and blueweed down in the lower nickel area around Merritt. And so the contractors and I will discuss how they're going to approach a site like this. We don't want that truck moving all through that area, especially when it's in seed. Even Wolfie plants will have seed, so it just gets caught up in the truck and moved to another area. Cleaning of the equipment before they leave the site is a requirement by the contractors, as well as our action or JCP teams. They want to ensure that all of the equipment that they're using has been had all of the invasive plant seeds and parts removed. This is actually a cleaning station that is up at one of our pits north of Kamloops, up near Clearwater, and it's actually being used by Trans Mountain to go in and out of their right-of-way. And so they've set up cleaning stations along all of the construction areas for the Trans Mountain right-of-way. And when we have a contractor in there and they're not being used, we will go in there and use these sites for cleaning our vehicles as well, so that all of the weed seeds are going to be dropped in one cleaning area, And that way we know where we can come back and deal with any germinating seeds from a cleaning area that where the weeds have dropped. The roads to pits are often used by the public, and so we want to control weeds along those road right-of-ways as well. Although pits are usually restricted to the public use, as you know, lots of ATV activity in gravel pits, and not all the gravel pits have access closed off to the public. So we want to concentrate on those areas. That picture on the right is an access before we get into a pit, but it is Crown land, so we take responsibility and do treatment of those weeds with the permission of the land manager for whatever agency has jurisdiction on that land. And in the right one picture on the left, this is a gravel pit area entrance to it, and you can see a lot of the concrete no posts there behind that shrubby tree. And we see a lot of gravel pits are storage areas for concrete no posts, other equipment and materials, and so we want to stop the movement outside. This is a pit just north of Kamloops as well. On the right is the treatment after Clearview. We used Clearview on this infestation. It's Horiolisum that you see on the left. So this was the following year, and we've got lots of nice regrowth of grasses. There's some crested wheatgrass in there, as well as some native species as well. But that's a nice cleaned up area that even if the public or other equipment or vehicles end up going off the road a little bit, they're not going to be picking up any weed seeds. We are, as I've mentioned before, spread by equipment and materials. There's the no post with at one of the pits up in the Caribou, lots of spotted knapweed around there. The equipment's going to grab the spotted knapweed seeds and plant parts. When it goes in to remove these no posts, these no posts are going to get put on a flatbed truck, highboy, and then they're going to have weeds and weed seeds in there, and they'll be transported to the location where that material is going. On the right, you can see there a structure there where a lot of equipment is being stored, or sand and salt shed storage. And you can see the spotted knapweed on the road accessing that area. So there's a lot of equipment being moved and occupying the area around this shed, and so we want to be on top of getting rid of that spotted knapweed so it's not being moved. We often see that even though pits are not active, they are and inactive, they're still a vector for spread. These being used by the public if they're inactive. There might be some activity going on inside that gravel pit afterwards, as well as we see grazing domestic animals in gravel pits at times, and as well wildlife. So they're all vectors for spreading weed seeds and plant parts to new uninfested areas. The picture on the right, 2017, was treated mostly spotted knapweed, and then the following year you can see the flush of desirable grasses in that treated area. What we often see, and I'm sure you as land managers controlling invasive plants, once you get rid of that invasive plant, you reduce the competition for the desirable, and we often see a very great large flush of desirable vegetation, usually in the form of grasses, occurring the following year. So it's often good the following year to see what kind of vegetation is recovering at the site, as well as we don't want to be seeding the year of treatment with herbicide, residual herbicides. Yeah, wait and see what reoccurs there. Often there's no need to reseed. It does it naturally on its own recognizance. This is, control of invasive plants in areas where there's high vehicle use. You can see on the left-hand photo there, lots of activity or lots of area for vehicles and equipment and stuff to come in. And you can see on the right-hand side, that was invasive plants, some Horiolisum in there, some spotted knapweed, oxeye daisy, and it's been very effectively controlled with residual herbicides. These areas were not deemed to be materials that would be removed. This is a really nice shot of the Lewis Creek pit up near just before Barrier, 2015, very heavily infested with spotted knapweed. And then 2 years later, you can see the really nice flush of grasses come up. And that's really going to be a big deterrent to the knapweed reinfesting that area or the knapweed regrowing in that area. This nice strong stand of grass is going to resist the growth of rosette plants. In the past, we have done seeding in gravel pits. We have done over in the left-hand side there, we did a bunch of seeding up at in the Caribou after some of the fires. That was at Hance's Timber. We also put a satellite map and indicate where the seeding has taken place. That was largely the seeding was done around the perimeter of that Hance's pit, and then also at the Centennial pit in Williams Lake. We recognize that there's a lot of bare soil in pits, so if we can put down a grass seed there that will occupy that bare soil, that's just an integrated approach that we're using all the tools we have. So the benefits are we're using an integrated pest management approach. We're reducing herbicide use, less load on the environment. We've reduced the risk of herbicide resistance for glyphosate. Our concern was always, has been in the past, consistent use of glyphosate in gravel pits, often more than once a year, sometimes 4, often year after year. We're just courting resistance of some of the invasive plant species we have here in BC. Spotted knapweed, Dalmatian toadflax, some of our hawkweeds, the list goes on. We certainly don't want to have resistant strains of those invasive plant species showing up in BC. That just creates a whole different problem for us altogether. We see less movement and spread of weeds from this strategic approach, effective use of dollars, and the pits are often and usually more resistant to invasive plant reoccurrence or invasion. So that's it for me. I'll turn it over to Fiona or Megan or Gwen.
I'll be back on, Dave. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Megan. I'm going to stop sharing.
Sounds good. Okay, well, thank you so much, Dave, for that detailed presentation. It was really great.
Great, you got 11 minutes left.
Yeah, you did good with time. So we'll begin the Q&A now. I'll start with the first questions and work my way through until we reach 10 a.m. As I mentioned before, if there's not enough time to address all the questions, the answers will be sent out afterwards by email. If you see your question that's already been asked, you can click the thumbs up button and it'll bring the question to the top of the list. Also, a note that the quiz is now open. Again, you must complete it to gain your continuing education credit. So you can click on the link that'll be in the chat, or you can use your phone, as I believe we'll be putting up a QR code on the screen. And just note, if you are from Alberta, it will ask for your date of birth. So let's go with the Q&A now. I'll just bring that up. All right, so the first question that is in here, I can answer that quick. It's asking if the recording of the webinar will be available. Yes, it will be available on the ISCBC Learning Center a little bit later this month, and all ISCBC and IBMA members will be able to access it for free. So this one for you, Dave. It's got I think we've got 3 kind of questions all in this one, so I'll read it all out, and if you need the different parts, let me know. So it
Okay.
asks, have you seen any issues with resistance? How far is your separation between materials deemed active and inactive? And do you have a minimum distance for materials scraped away or removed to eliminate spread? So that first one
You
is
haven't,
about resistance.
sure, I'm not muted, am I?
Nope, we can hear you.
Okay, so we haven't seen any resistance in any gravel pits. Good story. We have seen resistance to clopyralid with spotted knapweed down in the East Kootenays, but it's been an isolated location, and it was continued use of clopyralid over a number of years. So yes, fortunately, we haven't seen resistance on any species in pits. How far is the separation between materials deemed active and inactive? If it's level ground, we're typically not worried about any distance between them. If we are applying a residual herbicide on a slope, then we will usually move back a few feet to try to create a bit of a buffer between the materials that may be removed, a bit of a no pesticide zone. And as far as, do you have a minimum distance for materials scraped away or removed to eliminate spread? I'm not really sure what that question means. So I'm not really sure what they're pertaining to in that third question. So maybe they can answer it or pose a different type of question.
For sure. Thank you. Then the next question is, how do you manage seed transport in runoff water from cleaning stations?
We don't have any cleaning stations per se for our gravel pit contractors. They remove their contaminated soil and stuff from their equipment by hand and manually. Yeah, usually what happens with cleaning stations is there is a bit of a containment area in the cleaning station area so that weed seeds are not easily removed off of that location when there's high water or when there's a runoff.
Great, thank you. The next question is, are all of these sites publicly or government owned? What are the treatments and use of methods on private pits?
All of the gravel pits and locations in this program with our jurisdiction of Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. And what are the treatments and use of methods on private pits? We don't really have any control over use on gravel pits that are private. We will prescribe when approached, we will prescribe very similar prescriptions to what we're using with the MOTI gravel pit program. But they're private lands. We're always encouraging them to use, to manage the invasive plants in private gravel pits. That's also the other part of the equation for pathways and vectors for spread from gravel pits, be them private or public.
Great, thank you. So then the next question is, how many gravel pits are there to treat in BC?
Oh gosh, good question. Thousands, I bet. They're all over. There's not only are there MOTI gravel pits, but there are also gravel pits on a Crown land jurisdiction through the Ministry of Forests. When we started our gravel pit program in 2015, we had 22 pits on our list for treatment. As of the end of this year, we have about 162 pits on our list for treatment. They don't all get treated each year. We do go in and we do monitor and evaluate whether we need to retreat the year or whether we can leave it rest and reevaluate it and monitor the following year.
Great. So the next question is, what plant list of invasive species do you use? Is the plant list of invasives determined by the ministry or by the province? I'm from Alaska, so not familiar is what they said.
Definitely all of the weeds listed on the Provincial Weed Control Act regulations are addressed. We also will treat known invasive species that are of high priority in a region that may not be on the provincial statutes. So noxious and or invasive plant species are usually the list that we use.
Great. Can you describe the cleaning stations that are used in gravel pits? Is there water involved? Is it just dry scrubbing with brushes? How are drop seeds collected and disposed of?
They are usually just dry scrubbing and brushes and shovels, removing dirt and material all around the wheel wells and on the ATVs, side by sides and so forth. Our contractors are usually returning to gravel pits. We have a list of contractors that we use. We like to go back to the same contractor each year. They know the gravel pit location. They know the species. They are familiar with the history of the operations at the pit. So when they're removing weed seeds and so forth from their equipment, they will usually do it in the same area at a pit, and then they know what location to go back each year and look for potential germinants at that cleaning spot.
Great. I'm just watching time. I think we've just got time for one more question. So
Okay.
what are the best ways to quarantine or mark out areas with weeds or areas that have been treated with residual herbicides? I find we often have different staff members working these pits, and operations managers don't always have this information relayed to every new person.
So what we do is we don't have any quarantine. Of course, we mark each pit with their pesticide use signs so that they're familiar with what species and what herbicides were used at the pit. And with our strategic management plan for each gravel pit, as well as the satellite photos, they are deposited into a file for that pit. And those files are updated each year, and they are given to the environmental roadside manager, and he distributes them to the pit information to the appropriate area managers with MOTI. So it's a bit of a transfer of information, but it's all located in one spot. So there are files for each pit. So different and new staff members coming on have access to those files and can see what kind of activities occurred at which pit and where.
Great, thank you, Dave. There's a few more questions there, but we are getting close on time, so we'll make sure that we collect those up and send out the answers by email later.
Okay.
All right.
There you go, Graham Geelans with the highways. He says there's 2,500 MOTI gravel pits in BC. So we're a long ways away from treating getting all of these on our program, but we will increase each year.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Dave, for your great presentation and sharing your expertise with us today. Thanks as well to Gwen, and on behalf of the ISCBC and IVMA and all of those that are listening. We'll be sending out a link to a short survey to all participants, and we really encourage you to please fill it out so that we can get your feedback and ideas for future webinars. A quick reminder to please make sure that you have completed the quiz so you can get your continuing education credit. If you're not already a member of IVMA or ISCBC, please visit the links that will be in the chat. And thank you to everyone for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.